All right, hey Grier, good to see you again.
You as well.
Unofficially, maybe this is like episode two. We had our first kind of talk together, went well, so here we are doing it again. So this is cool. We got some good feedback, a couple questions, in response to our first video together. So biggest one was, what's the difference between protocol, non-protocol? And then Grier, you've kind of coined the phrase like protocol not applicable, which is a Grierism.
Yes.
So tell us, give us like the real simple high level of protocol, non-protocol, and then protocol uh, applicable.
Yep. So the protocol was actually, I think it was created in 2004, maybe,
Mhm.
by some of the major broker dealers. And when it was created, I think it was a way for them to kind of put something in place that made it not so difficult to make a move, but also not easy.
Like rules of
Since
engagement, I would call it. I've been through two of those protocols, like rules of engagement. This is what you can do, this is what you can't do.
Yes, and they put together a list of 5 data points that you can bring for your clients, and they are mostly just contact information. So your clients' names, email addresses, phone numbers, addresses, and then the account titles. So it's enough information to really do a lot with it in terms of knowing the book of business and knowing what you're going to be doing during the transition. So a protocol is, in my opinion, definitely a preferable transition to a non-protocol transition, but there's also a little bit of a discrepancy on what non-protocol really means. And when I
Sure.
refer to non-protocol, it means that it's still one of those tough transitions where the protocol is where the firms are not in the protocol, and so you can't bring any of the information with you. And that's why I kind of had to coin the other phrase, which is the protocol not applicable, and I call it a PNA. And that is when we're not even dealing with the protocol at all because you're coming from a place where you either own your book of data or the protocol just is not something that's applied in the situation. Generally, when advisors are leaving existing RIAs to either start
Sure.
their own or join a different one, um, you're not always subject to the protocol because of the level of independence and ownership you have over your book of business and the client data. So if I had to rank them, it would be non-protocol, where
Yep.
we're talking about the most strict and restrictive situations. A lot of the really large firms, some examples of non-protocol firms that you would recognize are Edward Jones, UBS, Morgan Stanley. Those are the ones that I find are the most kind of aggressive in nature
Mhm.
when you are thinking about a transition, the ones that have things written into contracts that allow you to not do a lot of things, non-solicitation, non-protocol. And then the protocol ones are the ones that kind of have this written agreement where you
Right.
can bring some of the data with you, but they really don't want you bringing all of the data. They just want you to be able to contact your clients, almost as a recognition that they are your clients and you are the one that has the relationship with them. So you get an opportunity to solicit them. Doesn't mean they have to come with you.
Right. Right. And
But
kind of in all instances, I think the big thing too that freaks a lot of people out is like, we're talking about the data you can take. Well, a lot of clients, right? On the client side, I went from Merrill Lynch to Morgan Stanley, Morgan Stanley to my independence. And a lot of clients was like, hey, Nick, why didn't you tell us sooner? Why didn't you let us know this was coming? Blah, blah, blah. I said, well, again, protocol, non-protocol, you cannot say a word to your clients about
right.
what you're doing, or you violate that whole kind of rules of engagement on the protocol side. Non-protocol, you can't say a word to anybody, within reason. So I think there's a lot of concern there too with advisor transitions, but that also breeds client concern, as well. So I don't know what your experience is with that, Greer, with working with groups in transition.
Um, yeah, it's one of those things where this industry is fairly unique. There's not a ton of industries. There's a lot of industries that do maybe like non-solicits, non-competes, but they're not necessarily as strict as this one in that you can't say a single word. And you're kind of leaving in the middle of the night and then you're making this mad rush to call all of your clients and they're confused. I think that it is becoming a little bit more popular. So some clients are starting to kind of pick up on the whole process and understand, but it really is, even the protocol is like still not necessarily in the best interest of the clients. You know, I this I don't know
It's
what to
tough
say
because
about
they're
this industry. I mean, and I created a business purely around this one particular thing, and it is a successful business now. But sometimes I feel like if they just changed a few rules, my business wouldn't even be necessary, and we could all do what's in the best interest of the client. But, I don't see that happening anytime
No,
soon.
that's
So,
not happening because at the end of the day, like these firms want to hold on to everybody. They want to make it as difficult as possible to move around. And again, like from a recruiting perspective, I know that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks that recruiters face in transition and getting groups to leave wirehouses is like advisors are just scared. They're just like, man, like I don't know if I can go through this and risk it all. Because you literally go to zero the day you leave that Friday afternoon, because everybody leaves on a Friday. You go to zero and you work your butt off through the weekend and just hope and pray that you didn't do anything wrong and that your contra firm's not going to come back and put an injunction on you or try to call the courts. Then you work as hard as you can to get everybody back. So I think you're going to have a very successful and a career with lots of longevity, Grier, because these wirehouses aren't letting go of those non-competes. The last question we got to was like technology, right? What are the custodians? What are these wirehouses or groups doing from a technology perspective? I haven't seen a whole lot. I've heard some rumblings. That's obviously why we built the OnBord tool for transitions, because I don't think, quite honestly, there's a whole lot out there that really specifically looks to tackle it. I don't know if you've run into anything else on the custodial side or wirehouse side that has been helpful technology wise.
yeah, I think that with the custodians, it's tough for me because I hear a lot about some of the improvements of technology that's being made with some of the custodians, but my part of the process is really just focused on the transition, so I never get to see any of the shiny new toys. Um, I am stuck with whatever the process is that's created for transitions, and a lot of firms take an approach of this is very temporary. It's one of those things that we have to do in order to get the assets over, but it is temporary, and so we're not going to throw a ton of money at the process of actually doing a transition. But I can say that I have been doing transitions with the major custodians for many, many years now. And some of them I have seen the process vastly improve. Raymond James, for example, they spend a lot of money on improving their processes. And because their process for transitions is very, very similar to their everyday process, the improvements that they make for the everyday process naturally improve the transition process. Plus, they have some really great tools that they keep rolling out that are kind of templates that you can fill out that will help put all of the information into the system in the format that you need. And we kind of help with the preparation of that. Um, you know, I mentioned Schwab, and I think Schwab is just, I think they're in a pivotal moment right now. They've acquired one of their competitors. They have a lot of advisors under them. I think that they do try to make technological improvements, but what I usually see is that they'll start to build a completely new system instead of trying to improve their current ones. And so then you have this situation where there's like 4 or 5 different ways to do something, but none of them is perfect. They're all kind of a minimum viable product. And so it's it's hard to figure out a one right way to do
Right.
something. So,
And I think some of the perspective too of these big companies is that now that we have like open API
yep.
and there's groups like OnBord and Orion and Redtail and Wealthbox trying to figure everything out and kind of create the best mousetrap or the best technology. I almost think that some of these groups are just saying, well, we can sit back a little bit and let these integrations build. And if we find one we really like, obviously, Schwab, Fidelity, whoever, they got big pockets that they can write checks and buy technology that they really like. So I think that is part of the evolution of what we're seeing here is it's like, not that they don't want to lead with technology, but that, it's kind of an open architecture. That's a lot of reason I went independent was to pick my own technology and really what made sense. And so, it's not a one size fit all. So perhaps that, is kind of weighing into it as well.
And that's one thing that I use to compare the custodians a lot because, I get a lot of people who, for some reason, maybe it's because I do so many Raymond James and Schwab transitions, they want to compare the two. And like they're the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to custodians that you can use when when you're starting an RIA. Like Raymond James is built to be a broker dealer inside everything, and Schwab, like you said, is built to have all those integrations. And so, yeah, they might not spend a ton of time and effort and money on improving their internal operations, but they are the first company that all these firms like OnBord go to integrate with, and which is great. So they're two pros and cons lists that look very, very different. And the benefits of using something like a Schwab is that you can go and pick and choose your tech stack and you can automatically integrate everything with Schwab, which is great. Like the using OnBord for a transition with Schwab is it's it's extremely beneficial because Schwab doesn't have anything like what OnBord does from a client information collection standpoint. But, like I don't know that Schwab is ever gonna I just I it's hard to
Well,
say, but
Grier, it
yeah.
also comes back to, especially on the transition side, it also comes back to what we just talked about: protocol, non-protocol, information, like Schwab, Fidelity, all these custodians, they don't want to get involved with anything related to the client until that advisor has left, broken away, and has moved their registrations to wherever they're going. Right. So I think you're in that gray area that a lot of custodians are like, hey, we don't want to play in that game until the transition has already happened. So I think that kind of, proves the point a little bit too there.
And I
Um,
and I do think that they are kind of all making their own templates and things like Schwab has always had a template that you can fill out for a protocol transition. LPL, they created their own like technology software that you can use to kind of get all of the accounts ready. Raymond James has a template. It's so you're right. Everybody is trying to kind of separate it by a little bit of a firewall. They're not necessarily wanting to build out the technology internally because you can't use it until you are utilizing the technology for your firm overall until the transition starts. So,
right.
yeah, I do think that we've come a long way with technology. When I first started doing transitions, it would just be boxes and boxes of paperwork showing up on your doorstep, and you would be hand filling in the client
Oh,
information that you were collecting over the phone and sending UPS envelopes, which
nightmare.
yeah, it was time consuming. There was a lot of scanning. In some ways, I guess it was a little bit simpler, just because you didn't have to rely on technology. But in other ways, the amount of trees
Yeah.
that
I,
we
I
were
remember getting those
destroying.
boxes. I remember getting the boxes from Schwab when we left Morgan Stanley to go independent, and they deliver the boxes of custodial forms, and it was like 10 boxes high. And I'm just counting my mind how many overnight envelopes they're putting in there, right? Every
Yep.
single household had one to go out and one to come back. You're going, oh my gosh, that's $50 a turn easily, 25 going each way. And then that doesn't even count for like the human element of filling that all stuff out, and can you read people's handwriting, and did I miss a box, etc. So yeah, what a
And
mess.
pulling out stacks of
Oh,
disclosures, 100 pages that just said like client copy on them that you knew the
yeah.
client was never going to touch. So it was just going straight into the recycling or the trash or whatever. It was just, yeah. But I mean, the technology doesn't always work the way that you want it to either. Like DocuSign is not a perfect, and DocuSign I feel like has become the standard, but they've kind of caught on to how many industries are really utilizing DocuSign, and so now they're quite expensive and they
Yep.
charge by the envelope. And so yeah, technology, it doesn't always work together, it doesn't always work correctly, and it's hard, but I
That's why
guess
we
it
need
it's
people like you, Greer, to keep it all together.
Oh, yes, I've definitely dug out my own little corner of this industry, and so have you. I mean, you see, those are the best companies sometimes, the ones that see an issue and they just go and you create a company to solve one problem, and And it's okay that it doesn't solve all the problems, because as long as it's solving one problem that a lot of people have, then it is going to eventually be successful. And I think that that's what we can both say for our little part of the industry where we are doing transitions. So
I love it. I love it. Cool. Well, thanks, Grier. Appreciate the time, and I'm sure we'll do it again soon.
yeah, sounds great.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks.